Hey guys, what's going on? This is Roth. I am so excited to be here with Scott Glenn. I have to tell you, we were just talking about this a little bit outside, but as a little girl, I had pictures of fighter jets on my wall because I was such a fan of the right stuff. So this is a thrill for me. But you're in a movie right now, movie that's going to come out on March 27th on VOD and select theaters. The Barber, very different character, not the hero that we know from the right stuff. Talk a little bit about that. This is a man with a past, a very shadowy past.
Yeah, when you sort of initially meet me, I've been a barber in this small town in Wisconsin for about 15 years. Single, uptight, sort of a constricted, but nevertheless one of the pillars of the community, help at-risk kids. And a young guy comes up to me on the streets after I come out of a diner where I always eat dinner and essentially says, I know that you've been a barber in this town for 15 years and this is what everybody here thinks you are, but I also know that 16, 17 years ago, you were the main person of interest in Chicago in the disappearance, ultimately discovered rape and murder of 17 young girls. And I know you did it, and I've got the same urges and the same itches, and I want you to teach me essentially how to pick up and kill young girls and get away with it.
And it's got a really terrifying sort of mentor-mentee edge to it.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit, sort of, how deeply did you delve into that kind of world in your research?
Well, I had already, in great detail and very deeply, done that with Silence of the Lambs.
That's what I imagine you would sort of draw.
Yeah, I'd spent time with a guy named John Douglas, who's sort of the father of criminal profiling, with FBI, what do they call it, behavioral science in Quantico, and sat in on case studies and sort of know more than I'd like to know about in most cases men, almost every case men who get involved in what the FBI never calls it serial killing, they call it sexual homicide.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. Because
it always involves power and a confusion of sex and violence for a lot of reasons, all of which are some kind of abuse of the boy when he was young, and a confusion that happens that's sort of a combination of that abuse and puberty, and the wires get mixed up and they get off on this. So anyway, it's a world that I was on one level really familiar with, and then when I got the part, I started like looking into it more carefully.
So was it interesting for you to sort of, you had played Jack Crawford, so the FBI agent, so was it interesting to kind of explore the other side of that coin as an actor? Yeah,
it was. I mean, one of the things I realized, and kind of even knew when I was doing Silence of the Lambs, which is, I think, a great film, and Jonathan did a great job, but let's call them serial killers. The real serial killers that I've looked into are nothing like Hannibal Lecter or the character Ted Levine played. I mean, that guy walks into a room and you run out. He's scary. The real ones use what I would call the disguise of normalcy. They're not aggressive. They're not confrontational. They feel safe. They, a guy like Ed Kemper looked like some insignificant computer nerd. Ted Bundy looked like, in fact, was a young Republican.
Yeah, pretty boy.
Yeah, so these, and I realized I had a chance to sort of get closer to the reality of these people, and also be able to play a part that keeps changing gears on the audience.
Yeah.
So you're never really on solid ground. You never really, is this guy a killer, or is he an emotionally crippled, lonely old man who just wants company? And the thing that I saw in this film right away was was going to have way more colors to play with than I normally do when I'm working. And also that a lot of sort of relationships and concepts that are very basic, like old age. What does that look like? Is it physically constricted, or is it athletic and you know, and lethal and limber? What really are the relationships between father and son, mentor and student, needer and needed, hunter and hunted, you know, or predator and prey? And the film takes those, if those relationships were cards, and constantly reshuffles them. So once you think, okay, now I know the relationship between these people, now wait a minute, I was wrong about that. And it's, someone I was talking to said the film is like a mystery that keeps solving itself. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, a heartbeat later, you realize it was a lie and it didn't solve itself at all. And it kind of does that almost to the very end of the film.
Absolutely, it does. It keeps switching. You know, as the audience, you're not quite sure until you're really sure,
right,
which side he's really playing on. But can you talk about that a little bit when you are working with something like that, where there's this duality? Do you pick moments to bring out sort of the truth of who this person is, even when he's playing?
Yes and no. I decided that the way I think, and I think it's the truth about a lot of these people. Maybe a lot of people who aren't criminals, aren't killers, but do tell a lot of lies. Is the hallmark of a lot of these guys are that they come to believe their own lies. So if you gave them a lie detector test, they would pass it with flying colors because they actually believe that they are whatever their present persona is. So what I did in this movie was I played each one of these versions of this character completely straight, completely like it was the truth, not ever wanting to show my hand and go, by the way, until the very end of the film. And the only sort of clue that I like slid into the film and thought hopefully it's the kind of thing that somebody will go back and see the second time around were physical things.
Yeah.
Does this guy, when he's alone, really need to wear glasses when the phone rings? Well, if you really pay attention, you say, he doesn't have to wear glasses. Well, how come he's, you know, or I made a conscious decision that one of the ways that I was going to deal with the age of this guy was, and it was a trick that I learned years ago in New York as an actor, freeze your ankles. If you freeze your ankles, if I stand up, am I going to go out of the shot? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to stand up anyway. And can you see me move in this direction?
Yeah.
That's moving with frozen ankles. That's being up on your toes. So things like that, you know, I knew that there were times when I sort of went in between the physical stuff to give a little, so if people went back and saw the film, they'd go, oh, wait a minute. He's old, but there's nothing infirm about him. Those were places where I and the director, Basil, would try to pick places. And also, I told Basil, I said, you know, there's kind of like, I saw 2, maybe 3 characters inside this one guy, but I said, I don't trust myself to be consistent with everything I'm doing. So if you see that I'm too easily walking across the room, just come up and whisper, you're the old Eugene now.
Yeah.
And I'll remember to sort of do that physical overlay.
I wanted to talk about that. There are moments of intense physicality
Yeah.
in this role. And And it's interesting because you have an action series coming up, Daredevil, which Stephen DeKnight has said very much like Scott's in better shape than any of us. And you know, there's an intense physicality in that. So I wanted to ask you what it's like for you to tackle this kind of physicality, and then also sort of action sequences as a blind man, as Stick in Daredevil.
As Stick, it was brand new for me because I'd never played blind before.
Yeah.
So the first thing I had to figure out was, how do I do this? And I kind of got to know very well during the shooting of it, a guy named Philip Silvera, who was the stunt coordinator. And when I first got together with him in New York, he said, "You know most of this stuff, don't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been playing around with it since I was 9 years old." And after an afternoon of he and I kind of just, you know, playing around on the set, he said, "We'll have stunt doubles and with long shots, because I don't want to really kill you." He said, "But you can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I want you to do all this stuff." And the trick for me was being able to incorporate, you know, action that was really on the edge of Hong Kong Bruce Lee stuff.
Was that who you were sort of drawing on, Bruce Lee as a model?
No, I was drawing on the many lessons I've learned during my life, a lot of which I learned at a place here in LA called, excuse me, the Inosanto Academy. Filipino martial arts and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, a lot of stuff. The trick was to have that flow and be, you know, Daredevil is probably the most stunt-heavy TV series ever shot.
Wow. And
my character is on the sort of high volume side of that. So for me, it was almost every day. The challenge is too weak a word. The demands of the part were to integrate blindness and that, and you know, and being a martial arts master with the sort of emotional life that was also going on at the same time. It was a lot of fun. I loved it.
Talk about that emotional life. I mean, were you familiar with this character? Did Stephen Knight draw you to certain comics to kind of get familiar? Were you working out the
to
page?
begin with, I'm going to be really careful about what I say, because if you know Steve. You know Marvel.
Yeah.
Okay. Marvel are the most, how do I say, security conscious group I have ever been around. And I respect that. They treated me phenomenally well. They let me create this character as much as I wanted. No one ever like edited me and everything I wanted or needed in terms of living in New York or having props or all of it was phenomenal. So I want to really respect their desire for security. So I don't know. I had to learn completely about the world of comic books and graphic comics and who Stick is in relationship to the Daredevil, and I knew none of that. What I did know, once I met all these people involved in the show, was whether they were 70 or 17, this stuff is serious to them.
Yeah.
And so I took it, I made it the decision that it was going to be serious for me too. You know, it's interesting playing something that's gritty and kind of reality based, but then also, yeah, I mean, at one point, I don't want to really. Well, I can say this. At one point, I said, "Well, how old am I?" And the director said, "You're in your late 90s." And I went, "My late 90s?" And he said, "Well, you have to understand this world that you're, you know, physically, you still have the strength of a 22-year-old."
Yeah.
So there was a lot of work in that comic sort of world where where you could creep up to naturalism and reality, but at a certain point, kind of not, too.
I
feel myself sort of almost stammering talking about it because they really want, they want as much of this show to be a surprise to the audience as possible, and I get that.
Yeah.
It should be.
We love the trailers that we've seen, the street level grittiness of it, but yeah, it is a heightened world, you know.
It's so much fun to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I really loved doing it, and it was super hard work.
Yeah, and it's, you know, the TV, they're so huge, the TV and the cinematic world. I mean, Stick could show up in a movie, it really could. Like, anything is possible with Marvel these days, which is super neat.
Yeah.
But we're excited to see you. He said, you know, he cast you off The Leftovers too, which we love that show, man. Such great work in that show as well.
Well, that's Damon Lindelof, who, you know, in terms of writing for me, it's like he channeled me. I called him up a couple times and I said, how do you know me so well? I mean, I just open my mouth and these words come out. I almost don't even have to read them.
Well, he's got that duality too, right? Kevin does. I mean, to me, it's like he knows things that he's not able to say that he knows. You know.
Yeah.
Very fascinating character. But just swinging back to this, again, the Barber, you know, it's natural to sort of liken and think about things like Hannibal, but you brought something up that's really interesting, which is that this is probably closer to the reality of what one of these killers would be like in our world.
Yeah.
Why do you think that heightened version, that Hannibal version we're coming up on the 25th anniversary, has endured so much? Is it too scary to think that what a serial killer like is not so obvious?
I think people don't want to feel that they have to be that cautious. And, you know, I mean, in many ways, The Barber is a cautionary tale to not ever depend on the kindness of strangers.
Yeah.
Don't get into a stranger's car. Don't let them come in the back porch of your door. Don't let them get close to you. And people don't want to feel that they have to be that cautious about their life. You know, I mean, I have another feeling. I was talking to Tavis about it, about the success of Silence of the Lambs. I think another reason that movie did so well is because there are a lot of movies that are about the rites of passage from boyhood to manhood.
Yeah.
Every war movie you've ever seen, but there are very, very few movies about the rites of passage from girlhood to womanhood.
That is so true.
And Silence of the Lambs is one of them.
That
Jodie
is
a girl at the beginning and she's a woman at the end and has gone through, you know, a serious rites of passage. And I think that just pushed buttons all over the world with people.
And you played the mentor, helping guide her through that.
Yeah.
That's really, I have never thought about that, but that is, I've always thought about Hannibal and why we relate to Hannibal, but that's true. There are very few, and this is a great one. This is a scary movie. I had to say The Barber is scary because it does hit on some of those themes.
Yeah, it keeps turning on you.
Yeah, it does.
And they're all friends of mine, so you know I have to preface this by saying that. But I know actually four people who don't really know each other that well, but all saw The Barber, and they all essentially said that this one sticks with you.
Yeah.
They said basically this is beyond a thriller. This is the kind of film that once you see, when you walk out of the theater, you don't just put it down and forget it.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today. It's been so thrilling for us, so thank you again.
Thank you.
The Barber's out on VOD and limited theaters on March 27th, so you can check it out that way, either one of those two ways. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.